So you want to own the Iron Bank of Braavos. Good news first. You are buying the most feared financial institution in the known world, in a city no fleet has ever taken, and kings will cross an ocean to sit in your waiting room. Now the bad news. Your best customers are the worst borrowers alive. Kings take the largest loans, repay the least reliably, and when one of them simply decides not to pay, there is no court anywhere that can make him, no magistrate, no bailiff, no way to seize a castle. On paper, you have just bought the worst lending business ever built. In practice, you have bought the most powerful one. Because your profit was never going to come from being repaid, it comes from what happens when you are not.
Here is how we are going to do this. What the place costs to build, what it costs to run, where the coin actually comes in, and what your share is worth at the end of a year. Everything we can take straight from the books, we will. Braavos has a real currency with real exchange rates, and Westeros has recorded debts down to the last dragon, so a surprising amount of this is not guesswork at all. Where the books go quiet, we will use what a business of that shape actually costs to run, and we will tell you when we are doing it. By the end, you will know what the Iron Bank clears in a year, what that is worth in your money, and the one kind of customer that can end it. Let us start with what you are actually buying.
Braavos sits at the northern edge of Essos, in a lagoon behind fog and stone, and it exists because a group of slaves escaped Valyria and needed somewhere the freehold would never think to look. For about 100 years, nobody outside knew the city was there. That matters to your balance sheet more than anything else about the place. Braavos was built by people who had themselves been property, so the first law of your city is that no man, woman or child in it may be bought or sold. Every other great city in Essos runs on slaves: Volantis, Lys, Astapor, Yunkai, Myrene. Yours does not, which means that from its first day, Braavos had to get rich some other way. You are that other way.
What you are actually selling is safety. Your city cannot be reached by fleet. The only navigable channel into the lagoon runs directly beneath the Titan, a fortress built in the shape of a man, 400 feet of bronze and stone, with archers in its eyes and boiling oil in its mouth. No hostile ship has ever passed it. That single piece of geography is your entire pitch. Because if you are a merchant in Pentos, a magister in Tyrosh, or a lord in the Reach with far more gold than guards, earning the money was never your problem. Keeping it is. You solved keeping it. The Sea Lord governs the city, but your bank is what the city is for. You do not own a business that happens to sit in Braavos. Braavos is the vault. You are the door.
Before we spend anything, understand what owning this actually means, because it is not a company, and you are not a chairman. The Iron Bank is run by its keyholders. Each one carries a single key to a vault door that takes several keys to open, and that arrangement is the whole governance structure in one object. No individual keyholder can move the money. No individual keyholder can be robbed or threatened or bribed into moving it either, because his key alone opens nothing. So the keys are the shares. Buying in does not mean buying a building or a charter. It means being handed one of a small number of keys and a seat among people who have to agree before anything happens. That slowness is deliberate. It is also, as you will see, the reason the bank has outlived every government it has ever lent to.
So, what does it cost you to build? Start with the physical bank. Vaults cut into stone, sealed behind iron. A strong room that a determined army could not open in a week. That is expensive, but it is not the frightening kind of expensive. Call it the price of a large stone keep once, and you are close enough. Stone is cheap. Labour is cheap. Iron is not, but you do not need very much of it. And here is the part that surprises people who come to this expecting a grand founding cost. The building is the smallest line on the whole page. You could put up the Iron Bank's premises for less than a middling lord spends fortifying a river crossing. The vault was never the hard part.
The hard part is everything that has to already exist before your first deposit walks through the door. A harbour no fleet can enter, a war fleet to patrol it, a city that has never been sacked, governing itself, with courts that work and a coinage nobody clips, and above all, a century in which no one successfully robbed you and no depositor ever went home empty-handed. None of that is for sale. You cannot commission it, you cannot buy it from a rival, and no amount of gold shortens it. It is accumulated, year by boring year, by not failing, which tells you something important about the asset you are acquiring. The Iron Bank's real capital is not in the vault. It is the 100 years of people being right to trust it.
Now, the revenue you think you are buying. Interest on loans to kings, and the sums are enormous. When Eddard Stark becomes Hand of the King and finally opens the ledgers, he finds the Iron Throne 6 million gold dragons in debt. 3 million of that is owed to House Lannister. 1 million is owed to you. The rest is split between the Tyrells, the Faith, and the trading cartels of Tyrosh. 1 million gold dragons sitting there, quietly earning. And kings pay brutally for money like this. A crown in trouble borrows at 15, 20, sometimes 30% a year against ordinary merchant rates of 8 to 12. At 20%, that single loan throws off 200,000 gold dragons a year for doing nothing at all. It looks like the finest business ever invented.
It is not. And here is the part nobody tells you. Lending to a king has never been solved anywhere by anyone. If a merchant does not pay you, you go to a magistrate. If a lord does not pay you, you go to his king. If a king does not pay you, there is nobody above him to go to. No court, no bailiff, no seizure, no bankruptcy, no remedy of any kind. You simply own a very large number that has quietly stopped meaning anything. And a king knows this. He knows it while he is signing. Every sovereign loan you write is secured by nothing except the borrower's ongoing preference to stay on good terms with you, which lasts exactly as long as he still needs your money. The day he stops needing it, your contract is a piece of paper.
So, if the royal loans are not your business, what is? The first answer is deeply unglamorous. Your bread and butter is other people's money sitting still. Deposits. Every merchant house, every magister, every trading cartel from Ibn to Old Volantis needs somewhere to put coin that will not be stolen, seized, or burned in the next war. And there is exactly one address in the known world with a perfect record. That money costs you almost nothing. In many cases, the depositor pays you for the privilege of keeping it safe. And because they never all want it back on the same day, you can lend out several times what is actually in the room. That is not a trick. It is the entire mechanism of banking, and you invented it.
Then there is the desk that never closes, money changing. A dozen city-states, every one of them minting its own coin, all of them trading through your harbour. Somebody has to price one against another, and that somebody takes a cut of every single conversion. In Westeros, the arithmetic is fixed and public. 1 gold dragon is 210 silver stags. 1 silver stag is 56 copper pennies. A hedge knight's horse sells for 750 silver stags, which is 3.5 gold dragons. Take even half of 1% on the flow of 2 continents' trade, and you have a revenue line that never has a bad year, never defaults, and never once requires you to threaten anybody. Nobody makes a song about the exchange desk. It pays for the fleet.
Which brings us to something worth noticing about your client list. You are running two businesses at once, and they are almost opposites. Your merchants borrow small, borrow often, repay reliably, and pay you 8 to 12%. They are boring, and boring is what you want. Your kings borrow enormously, borrow rarely, repay badly, and pay you 20 or 30. Now here is the thing a modern banker would spot immediately. That 30% is not really interest. It is a risk premium on a loan you have no way of enforcing, which means it is not a price at all. It is a bet. You are not charging kings more because their money is more expensive. You are charging them more because a good share of them are simply never going to pay you, and the ones who do have to cover the ones who do not.
And that leads to the second real answer, which is the reason anybody fears you. When a king stops paying you, you do not write off the loan. You go and find somebody who would very much like to be king instead, and you fund him. Think about what that does to the arithmetic. A default is normally the end of a transaction. For you, it is the beginning of a better one. The throne is still there, the tax base is still there, the debt is still on the books, and the only thing standing between you and repayment is which person is sitting in the chair. So you change the person in the chair. The default did not cost you your money. The default is how you acquire a government.
This is not theory. It happens on the page. The Lannisters in King's Landing stop servicing the Crown's debt, so you send Tycho Mastoris, one of your own, across the narrow sea, and then north through a war, in winter, all the way to the Wall, to find Stannis Baratheon and offer him credit. Look at that as a business decision rather than a plot point. You have written off nothing. You have taken a bad receivable and spent a little more money to buy a claim on the same asset through a different owner. If Stannis takes the throne, he owes you the new loan, he inherits the old one, and he owes you the crown itself. If he loses, you have lost one envoy's travelling expenses and a modest advance against a debt that was already dead. The downside is a rounding error. The upside is a kingdom.
There is more, and it stacks. Marine insurance. Braavos is a city of ships, and underwriting a voyage against storm and pirate is a natural second business when you already know every captain, every route, and every cargo. Ransom and hostage finance, which in a world of constant small wars is remarkably steady work. Fees for simply holding and moving other people's gold from one city to another. And then the quiet one, worth more than all of them together. Information. You finance the fleets, the wars, and the grain of 2 continents, which means you know which harvest has failed, which mine is running thin, and which lord is overextended months before he tells anybody. None of it is glamorous. Together, it is worth more than every royal loan you hold.
Staff and your bank is far smaller than you would guess. A great banking house does not need a great many people. It needs a few very trustworthy ones. At the top sit your keyholders, who are not employees at all. They are owners, and the keys are the shares. Below them, a thin layer of factors and envoys, men who travel for months in order to sit across a table from a king, and are paid for exactly that. Below them, clerks, counters, guards, ship's captains, and a great many people whose entire working life is writing the same number into 2 different books. Wages are the smallest line you have, perhaps 3 to 4% of income. Banking has always been cheap to staff and expensive to trust.
Stock and spoilage, which for you means something slightly odd. Your inventory is bullion, and bullion does not rot, but it does move, and every time it moves, you can lose it. A galley carrying a year's profit out of Pentos goes down in a storm, and that loss is total, instant, and uninsured,
unless you insured it yourself. Then there is theft, which is not the risk you are imagining. Nobody robs you from the outside. The Titan makes that a daydream, and anyone who tried would be robbing the one institution in the world that can pay any price for revenge. Your real leak is always internal. A factor in a distant city writing loans to his cousins. A branch keeper quietly lending against nothing at all and covering the hole with next year's deposits. Banks are almost never broken into. They are hollowed out from inside.
Now, the costs nobody puts in the pitch. The largest is reputation, and it is not free. Your entire pricing power rests on everybody believing that you always collect, which means that now and then you have to collect at a loss, fund a war that will never pay you back, ruin a debtor you could have squeezed profitably for years, purely to keep the sentence true. Every enforcement is a marketing expense. The second cost is political. Braavos has to stay independent, so you keep a standing fleet and spend a great deal of quiet money making sure no larger power ever decides the lagoon is worth taking. And the third is the strangest line in your ledger. The city that houses the world's most patient creditors also houses the House of Black and White and the world's most expensive assassins. The books never say the two do business. The proximity does the work.
Now, an obvious question. If this is so profitable, why has nobody built a second one? Because almost nothing about it can be copied. A rival in Pentos can hire clerks, cut stone and offer better rates on the first day. What he cannot offer is a harbour that has never fallen, a century of unbroken repayment, and the credible promise that he will still exist in 40 years when a depositor's grandson comes to collect. And there is a nastier barrier underneath. Every king in the world already owes you money. A new bank's first customers would be exactly the borrowers you refused, and its first crisis would be the moment you decided to lend against it at a loss until it broke. Your moat is not the Titan. Your moat is that you have been correct for 100 years and nobody else has had the chance to start.
So, how do you lose all of this? 3 ways. 1. A default too large to absorb. Every bank has one client who is too big, and yours is the Iron Throne. If 6 million gold dragons goes bad in the same season as a war in Essos, your vault is deep, but it is not bottomless. 2. A run. Your deposits are lent out several times over, which is fine until every merchant in Essos wants his coin on the same morning. You have never had that morning. You are one very bad rumour away from it. And 3. The one that actually arrives. Your ultimate threat is that you can fund your customer's enemy. But that threat needs him to be afraid of his enemy, and it needs his enemy to need money.
Let us run one loan end to end, so the shape is clear. A lord comes to you needing 60,000 gold dragons to raise and feed an army through a season of war. You lend it at 20%, secured against his customs revenue. If he wins, he pays you 12,000 a year in interest and eventually the principal, and you have made a fine, dull return. If he loses, the interesting case, you do not chase him. You go to the man who beat him. That man has just fought a war, which means he is poor, which means he needs you more than the loser ever did. He takes over the customs revenue, and you offer to roll the old debt into a new loan on the whole realm. You have converted a dead 60,000 into a live claim on a bigger asset. That is the machine.
Right. The arithmetic. You have one hard figure. The Iron Throne owes you 1 million gold dragons. Westeros is a single realm on the poorer of the 2 continents, and your real business is Essos, so treat it as a small slice of your book. Call it 3 to 5%. That puts your lending somewhere around 30 million gold dragons. Gross yield across the whole book, blending cheap merchant loans with expensive royal ones, comes to about 12%. Subtract defaults, which on this client list run 3 to 4.
Subtract wages, ships, security and enforcement, another 3. What you are left with is a net margin of roughly 5%. 5% of 30 million is 1.5 million gold dragons a year, clean, split between the keyholders.
So what is that in your money? Nobody in Westeros publishes an exchange rate to modern currency, so here is the assumption, out loud, and you are free to move it if you disagree. Treat a gold dragon as a coin of roughly 1/4 ounce of gold. At recent prices, that is a little under $1,000 in metal alone. On that basis, the Crown's total debt is around $5 billion. Your loan book is somewhere near 25 to 30 billion, and you clear something close to $1.33 billion a year. And that is only the metal. In a world with no machines, gold buys far more labor than it does today, so the real weight of that money is heavier still.
So, would you buy a key? On the numbers, yes, and it is not close. A 5% net margin sounds ordinary until you notice what it is a margin on. A monopoly, in a currency nobody can debase, secured by the one harbor in the world that has never been taken. $1.33 billion a year with no serious competition and no regulator anywhere above you. But be clear about what you are buying. You are not buying a bank. You are buying a machine whose collections department is a war, and which stays profitable only for as long as every king alive believes you will always collect. The Iron Bank does not have its due because it is owed. It has its due because it has never once been seen to fail.